Good morning. Welcome back to Squawk Box Asia. The Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore kicks off today. And let's dive straight into our next conversation. I'm joined by the head of defense at Palantir, Mike Gallagher. He was also a former chair of the House China Select Committee. Mike, thank you so much for joining us on the sidelines of the dialogue, and welcome to Singapore.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start off with the conference itself. Can you give us any information about who Palantir may be meeting with here and any kind of Indo-Pacific engagements that Palantir has?
Well, Palantir, our mission is to help preserve the peace by making the United States military as lethal as possible, thereby instilling fear into the hearts of our enemies, whether they're the communists in Beijing or the Salafi jihadists in the Middle East. So we're hoping to interact with all of the U.S. military representatives here that we're already doing work with, as well as key allies and partners, because we know that one of the ways we can enhance deterrence in the near term is to have an actual common operational picture with our closest allies in the region, like the Australians, like the Japanese, and that's where our AI-enabled software can help our military and allied militaries close kill chains and close decision-making cycles much faster than our enemies.
Right, and so when we talk about who you are meeting with and US partners and supporters, are we talking about partners in AUKUS, in Quad? Can you give us any more details?
Yeah, well, obviously I came from Japan before this, and so we're talking with all militaries represented here. Shockingly, I don't think the Chinese military representatives are going to be meeting with us anytime soon. But the other thing that's important for us at Palantir is to forge partnerships with the other defense companies that are here. One thing we're seeing in America that I think is quite optimistic is the defense industrial base is undergoing a transformation. And just as Palantir spent the last 20 years crossing the so-called valley of death for a new entrant into the market to survive, we're hoping to pave the way so other companies, non-traditional defense companies, can survive, and so that we can also work more effectively with the traditional defense companies that are represented here, because everybody has a part to play as the geopolitical environment gets more destabilized, as we see an unprecedented conventional strategic buildup by China. We need everybody, and we need America's best non-defense companies to recognize that they have a part to play in terms of helping our military and allied militaries.
I wanted to pick up on your visit to Tokyo this week. You gave a speech where you laid out a bold vision for a joint victory strategy rooted in that deeper cooperation. But I wanted to, get you to help me reconcile this question, because we know that the US, Donald Trump, has imposed these tariffs on Japan and other countries. The Prime Minister of Japan has spoken about this being a national crisis. So on the one hand, you have the US pushing in terms of that security cooperation, but on the other, to an ally, hurting them from a trade perspective. Do you think that this is a smart move?
Well, my hope is that as we have negotiations over trade right now, that we not just remain narrowly focused on trade deficits, right, or some tactical disagreement about soybean imports or auto safety rules. The essence of my speech was a recommendation really to go bigger, recognizing that Japan is an indispensable ally in the Pacific, not just from a military perspective, but from an economic and technology perspective. So if, for example, we use the trade negotiations to embrace former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's vision of data free flow with trust, I think we have an opportunity for the U.S. and Japan to set the standard for how we handle cross-border data flows, which could eventually result in a regional digital trade agreement, which would be transformative for the entire Indo-Pacific. So my message to the trade negotiators is now we have an opportunity really to go big and get beyond a tactical disagreement on a trade deficit issue.
But do you think that such moves, though, in the longer term, could undercut trust?
Well, I think the proof will be in the pudding, right? Whether we're able to get a deal, whether we arrive at an enhanced economic position. And I do think there's an opportunity right now to do things in the military domain that have an obvious economic impact. For example, we had a lot of discussions in Japan about co-production of key weapon facilities, right? Where our best defense companies can work with Japanese defense companies in order to build long-range precision fires, critical munitions. And what's happened in Japan in the last few years has been nothing short of remarkable. A massive change in terms of their willingness to invest in their own defense, heading towards 2% of GDP spent on defense. That's something we need to embrace, build upon, and also leverage their cutting-edge expertise when it comes to shipbuilding and ship repair. That's where they can really help us.
Yeah, and we know that those trade talks are ongoing today. I wanted to move on now to the Middle East because the US president has visited Gulf states recently. Now, these are countries where we know that countries like Russia and China have been trying to court. Now, during that visit, there were major announcements in terms of defense and in terms of AI. But do you think that the US is ahead in that race vis-a-vis a country like China?
I think we are narrowly ahead, but that should not be a cause for complacency. The amount of money and resources that China is investing in AI right now, really investing their top-level talent, and obviously they have benefited from their willingness to steal our intellectual property, to cheat on major international agreements. So they are catching up, which is why we really need an allied strategy for AI investment. And if we're not present in places like the Gulf, we create an opening for China to flood the zone with people, with resources. They're willing to throw a lot of money around. So I'm glad the president went to the Gulf. I'm glad he had major wins in terms of the size of these deals. We need to make sure that our allies are increasingly trending in the direction of the U.S. and the free world and not Finlandizing in the direction of the Chinese Communist Party, because we know that if they dominate the commanding heights of critical technology like AI, quantum, synthetic biotech, they will use those technology to advance their repressive goals and their autocratic vision and their anti-American vision for the future.
Let's talk about the future of military technology, because we've just seen the eruption of conflict between Pakistan and India, and during that conflict we saw, and perhaps we were offered, a glimpse of China's narrowing in terms of the gap in military air power with the US, although keeping in mind that there is the fog of war, there is contested claims about what has happened. But how concerned do you think Washington should be about the future here, particularly as it relates to the race in AI?
Well, I think we should be very concerned about a few particular things when it comes to any kinetic conflict with China over Taiwan, over the Philippines. One, every war game I've ever participated in, even if we're able to deny the Chinese their initial goals, we run dry on ammunition really quickly. So our ability to reconstitute stockpiles of critical munitions is very fragile, which leads to the second thing. In any long conflict, the only short conflict is a quick Chinese victory. So in any long conflict, we are then forced to surge men and materiel across the Pacific, which is vast, and also we'd be subject to cyber attack along the way. That's really the second lesson in my analysis as chairman of the Select Committee on China. It's not an over there problem. We have to assume the U.S. homeland would also be a target for a cyber attack, if not a kinetic attack. And there I just don't feel like we're moving with a sense of urgency. Again, we should take Xi Jinping seriously when he says he wants to take Taiwan by force if necessary. And anyone who casts doubt on that really isn't paying attention to what he's saying to internal CCP audiences or what we've seen in other parts of the world with other dictators like Vladimir Putin. The lesson of Ukraine is that if a dictator tells you they're going to do a thing, you should treat that very, very seriously. Treat it as if the fate of the free world hangs in the balance, because in this case, it very much does.
Mike, so many questions, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining CNBC this morning. That was Mike Gallagher, who is the head of defense at Palantir. We'll have plenty more coming up from the Shangri-La Dialogue, Sherry.